Let's talk about DWIs. Now, there are two avenues of consequences to a DWI case. Now, the first avenue is the criminal justice system. It's exactly what you think it is. That's what you see in the movies, right? So that is getting arrested, bonding out, going to court, and fighting the criminal charges. The second avenue of consequences to a DWI arrest is your driver's license. In Texas, DPS can automatically suspend your license due to a DWI arrest. It all depends on what exactly happened during your arrest, whether or not you consented to a breath or a blood sample, or if you did consent to that breath or blood sample, if you passed or failed, or if you refused to provide that breath or blood sample. Now, if you're under the age of 21 and you get arrested for DWI, your license could also be suspended. Let's talk about the criminal side of DWI. Just like any other case, you've been arrested and now you have to bond out. You should appear in front of a judge within 24 hours for that judge to set the bond. Now, if you post the bond or you're given what's called a PR bond, in other words, you're let out on your signature, on your promise to appear, then two things are going to happen. One, you're going to be given a court date. It is very important that you do not forget your court date and that you show up on time to your court date. The second thing is they may give you conditions of bond. And when I say conditions of bond, what I really mean is rules that you have to follow. Those rules could include reporting to pretrial supervision that is probably ran by the adult probation department. It could include drug testing for drugs and alcohol on a random basis. Maybe your county has you call in every day, but it could be drug testing. You could order to have an interlock device installed on your vehicle, or you also may have travel restrictions. No matter what the rules are, you need to remember that you must strictly abide by those rules. If you do not follow those rules, then your bond could be revoked. You could be placed back in jail. You can either stay in jail while the case is pending or post a new bond. Now, let's say you bonded out and you have your first court setting. Your first court date is not your trial date, okay? That is not when the police officer is going to show up and testify about what did or did not happen. At your first setting, it's another opportunity for a judge to hear the allegations against you and decide whether or not the charges should continue. And it's another opportunity for a judge to decide if there should be conditions of bond in place or if we should change those conditions of bond. So you're going to have multiple court settings while we try to resolve your case. Typically, those court settings will be uneventful for you. It's an opportunity for the attorneys to exchange evidence and exchange mitigation and try to resolve your case. So let's talk about some ways we can resolve a DWI case. For some people, they're innocent and they weren't above the legal limit when they were driving. And for those people, a jury trial is probably the best bet if we can't get the case dismissed beforehand. For other people, we need to find other ways for them to avoid a conviction and get the case dismissed. Sometimes we can set them up to earn a dismissal, maybe through classes or community service. For some people, we will have to use a more of a formal probation to help them earn a dismissal. What you need to know, though, is even if you think you have a bad case, that does not mean you have to suffer all of the consequences of a DWI. Now, there are two ancillary consequences to a DWI conviction. Number one is a driver's license suspension. Like we discussed before, your license could have been suspended based on the arrest for DWI, depending on what happened. Well, depending on how your case is resolved, you could suffer a second driver's license suspension. Now, there are plenty of ways to avoid that driver's license suspension, but it's something you need to be aware of. Additionally, DPS can assess what's called the state traffic fine. That is a $3,000 or $6,000 additional fine on top of whatever you've negotiated to resolve your case. Again, there are certain ways to get around that. But those are two major ancillary consequences to a DWI conviction that you need to be aware of. Now, if you're thinking to yourself, man, that's a lot of information, and this is a little more complicated than I expected, well, you're right. DWI cases are very complicated, and that's not even considering the ALR hearing and possible driver's license suspensions that come along with that. If you found yourself in a situation where you've been arrested for DWI and you're looking for help, give us a call. I'm sorry to hear you're in this situation, but we look forward to helping you get out of it.